The reactor's heartbeat spiked. Sirens wailed across AstraCore Energy's glass atrium. On the observation deck, Adelaide Monroe, the new CEO in a red dress, pointed at the janitor pushing a mop bucket. "You can't fix this reactor." Henry Cole didn't argue. He stepped past stunned engineers, tore open an access panel, and his scarred hands moved like memory itself. Every relay, every wire, every forgotten failsafe returned to his fingertips. Nobody here knew the truth. Years ago, before politics erased his name, Henry built this place line by line, bolt by bolt, and the reactor still remembered him. The control room was chaos. Screens painted the engineers' faces red. The auxiliary reactor loop was climbing past safe operating temperature. Each tick a staircase toward meltdown. SCRAM inhibited, the display read. The automatic shutdown system wouldn't engage. 3 operators called out numbers in overlapping voices. Silas Grant, the shift supervisor, gripped the console edge so hard his knuckles went white. He was good at his job, everyone knew that. But good at following procedures, not rewriting them on the fly. This wasn't in any procedure manual. Henry had been mopping the hallway outside when the alarm changed pitch. Most people wouldn't notice. Most people heard sirens as just noise. But Henry heard the undertone. The secondary harmonic that meant coolant flow had dropped below minimum threshold. He stopped, left his mop bucket by the wall, walked toward the control room. Even though he knew what would happen, Adelaide saw him first. She was 34, blonde hair in waves over her shoulders, sharp eyes that had read 10,000 spreadsheets, but never seen a reactor in crisis. She'd been CEO for 6 months, long enough to know the org chart, not long enough to know who really understood the machines. "Security," she called out. "Why is a janitor in here?" Henry didn't look at her. He looked at the screens. Loop 7G was reporting closed on the return valve, but the flow rate didn't match. Sensor drift. The system thought it was circulating coolant when it wasn't. The core was cooking itself. "Ma'am," Silas said, his voice tight. "We're following emergency procedure. Echo 4. Manual shutdown sequence." "How long?" Adelaide demanded. "8 minutes if we don't have 8 minutes." Henry's voice was quiet, rough from years of not using it much. He moved toward the panel. Finn Reynolds, a 29-year-old engineer with good instincts and better curiosity, stepped aside. He'd seen Henry around, seen him fix a stuck door motor once with nothing but a screwdriver in 30 seconds. Seen him glance at a pressure gauge and frown before it triggered a warning. "Let him look," Finn said. Adelaide's hand went up. "Nobody touches anything without authorization. This facility operates under federal oversight. Chain of command exists for a reason. Chain of command doesn't know your Loop 7G return valve sensor is lying," Henry said. He pointed at the delta P reading between Loop A and Loop B. "See that differential? It's backwards. The valve housing is telling you it's closed because the limit switch is corroded. But the thermal mass in the secondary loop says you've got dead flow. The core is baking." Silas stared at the numbers. He'd been reading them as individual values, not as a story. Now he saw it. "Jesus. How do you know our valve designations?" Adelaide's voice had shifted from authoritative to suspicious. "How do you know that sensor is corroded?" Henry met her eyes for the first time. "Because I installed it. 14 years ago. I wrote the commissioning spec. I calibrated the limit switch with my own hands. And I told them back then that this housing design would fail in a high-humidity environment within 10 to 15 years. He turned back to the panel. "Looks like I was optimistic." Adelaide felt the floor tilt. She glanced at the employee badge clipped to his gray uniform. "Henry Cole. Maintenance services. No flags, no notes. Just a janitor." "Silas," she said slowly. "Who is this man?" Silas looked at Henry, then at Adelaide. "I don't know, ma'am." "Then get him out of here." "Ma'am." Finn's voice was steady. He just called the exact failure mode. He's right about the differential. If we follow Echo 4 without fixing the flow, we'll trip the safeties, but we won't stop the temperature rise. We'll be venting steam in 6 minutes. Adelaide's jaw set. She'd built her career on decisions. Fast decisions, clean decisions, defensible decisions. This wasn't clean. This was a man who'd appeared out of nowhere, claiming to know more than her entire engineering staff. But the numbers on the screen didn't lie. The core temperature was climbing. "If you're wrong," she said to Henry, "you'll answer for it." "I've been answering for things for a long time," Henry said. "One more won't matter." He moved before she could lock him out. His hands found the manual override panel. Not the main board, but the backup station behind the console, where the hardwired interlocks lived. Silas called out procedure codes. Henry ignored them. "Procedure was written for a plant that matches the design drawings," he said. "This plant hasn't matched the drawings since the budget cuts in 2016. He pulled a small multi-tool from his pocket, flipped open the screwdriver head, and removed the panel cover. Inside was a nest of terminals and relays that looked like every other junction box in the facility. But Henry's fingers moved without hesitation. He touched a specific terminal, traced the wire back, nodded. "Thought so." Someone bypassed the low-flow alarm. Probably to stop nuisance trips. Probably to make the quarterly KPI report look clean. "That's not possible," Silas said. "Every bypass requires engineering authorization and dual sign-off. It's possible if someone wanted it quiet." Henry glanced at the timestamp on the maintenance log. "Check your records. Someone modified this 6 months ago. Right before your last regulatory inspection." Adelaide felt something cold settle in her stomach. 6 months ago was when she'd been promoted, when the board had brought her in to stabilize operations after the previous CEO resigned, when Clinton Ward, the old COO, had been retained as a senior advisor because the board didn't trust a new leader with full autonomy. "We'll investigate that later," she said. "Right now, fix the reactor." Henry's hands were already moving. He identified the relay that controlled the secondary loop bypass, checked continuity with a test light he'd fashioned from a paperclip and a 9-volt battery, then manually reset the valve actuator to its fail-safe position. "Finn," he said, "I need you to read me the checksum on the HMI, 4-loop 7G. Finn pulled up the diagnostic screen. Echo 7 Delta 3-1. "Good. That's the original. It hasn't been tampered with at the software level, just the hardware." Henry used his knife to scrape oxidation from a contact point, reseated the connector, and turned a tiny potentiometer 3 degrees counterclockwise. That should bring the sensor back into spec. The room held its breath. On the screen, the temperature curve hesitated. Then, slowly, impossibly, it began to fall. 1 degree. 2. 5. The rate of descent matched the coolant flow rate that had just been restored. The secondary loop was circulating again. Silas exhaled. Finn grinned. Adelaide's hand, which had been hovering over the emergency notification button, slowly lowered. "How did you—" "Later." Henry closed the panel. His hands were shaking now, just slightly. Adrenaline catching up. "You need to verify that all the other loops haven't been modified the same way. And you need to find out who signed off on that bypass." Adelaide nodded. She felt like she'd just watched someone perform surgery, with a pocket knife and a prayer. "Silas, pull all the maintenance records for the last 12 months. Cross-reference every authorization. Finn, I want a visual inspection of every manual override in this facility. If there's one bypass, there might be others." "Yes, ma'am." They moved quickly, grateful for something concrete to do. Adelaide turned to Henry. He was already walking toward the door, back to his mop bucket, back to invisibility. "Wait," she called. He stopped. Didn't turn around. "Who are you?" she asked. "Nobody," Henry said. "Just the guy who cleans up." But his reflection in the polished steel door showed something else. Adelaide saw it for just a second before he left. The faint engraving on the access panel housing, half worn by years of hands and weather. H. Cole, lead engineer. Commissioned 2010. The man who'd just saved them had built this place, and someone had erased him from the records. Adelaide stood in the control room for a long moment after Henry left. Around her, Engineers were running diagnostics, pulling records, executing her orders with the relieved efficiency of people who'd just avoided catastrophe. But she wasn't thinking about the reactor anymore. She was thinking about a janitor who knew terminal designations without looking at documentation, who recognized sensor drift by the pattern of numbers on a screen, who carried a calibration tool disguised as a multi-tool. She walked to her office and pulled up the HR database. Henry Cole, hired 8 years ago as facility maintenance. No engineering credentials listed. No prior work history at AstraCore. The file was thin, almost suspiciously thin, as if someone had taken scissors to a resume and left only the parts that fit a predetermined story. But Adelaide had learned, in her 6 months as CEO, that the real story was never in the official files. The real story was in the margins, the metadata, the things people tried to erase but couldn't quite delete. She opened the archival records, the ones that went back to the plant's original construction. And there he was, Henry Cole, lead design engineer, chief architect of the Mark I reactor system, holder of 7 patents on advanced coolant loop safety systems, the man who'd written the procedures Silas had tried to follow tonight. And then, 10 years ago, his name disappeared. His personnel file was flagged. A note, brief and cold. Terminated for cause. Engineering review pending. All patent assignments transferred to corporate ownership. Adelaide felt anger kindling in her chest. She'd seen this before. Not here, but in her previous positions. The way organizations ate their own. When something went wrong. The way talented people became convenient scapegoats when executives needed someone to blame. She didn't know what Henry had been accused of, but she knew what he'd just done. He'd saved hundreds of lives, including hers, and then walked away like it was nothing. She pulled up the incident report from 10 years ago. The language was vague, legally careful. An equipment test had gone wrong. There'd been a minor containment breach, no radiation release, but enough to trigger a federal investigation. The report concluded that the lead engineer had pushed the test beyond safe parameters against the advice of management. The engineer's name had been redacted, but Adelaide could read between the lines. They'd needed someone to hang, and Henry Cole had been convenient. She scrolled to the authorization signatures at the bottom of the termination paperwork, and there, in the approvals list, was a name she recognized, Clinton Ward. At the time, he'd been the VP of Operations. He'd signed off on the dismissal. He'd signed off on the patent transfers. He'd signed off on the settlement agreement that had probably included a non-disparagement clause and hush money. Adelaide closed the file. She understood now. Henry hadn't just been fired. He'd been systematically erased, his name stripped from the very machines he'd built, and then somehow, inexplicably, he'd come back. Not as an engineer, not demanding recognition, but as a janitor, quietly keeping watch over the reactor that still bore his fingerprints. She picked up her phone, then put it down. What could she say? "I'm sorry we destroyed your career. I'm sorry I'm part of the system that chewed you up." She'd been young back then, a junior analyst in corporate finance, and she'd signed things too. Forms, transfers, documents she hadn't understood because her boss told her to sign. She didn't know if her name was in Henry's file, but it might be. And that thought made her feel sick. The next morning, Adelaide called an emergency audit meeting. Silas, Finn, and Astrid Hale, the company's internal counsel, gathered in the conference room. "I want to know," Adelaide said, "who authorized the modification to Loop 7G. I want to know why it wasn't logged properly. And I want to know if there are other, unreported changes to safety systems." Astrid opened her laptop. "I've been reviewing the maintenance logs overnight. There are gaps. Entire sections of the digital record that should exist, but don't. And the backup logs, the ones we're required to keep in hard copy, are missing pages." "Missing?" Adelaide's voice went cold. 3 months of entries. Someone removed them from the binder. Astrid slid a photo across the table. It showed the maintenance log binder with torn page stubs, but the security camera system logs every entry to the archive room. I pulled the footage. The screen flickered. Grainy footage showed a man entering the archive room at 2 in the morning. 6 months ago, he went straight to the maintenance binders, flipped through pages, and carefully extracted several sheets. His face was clear in the overhead light. Clinton Ward, Silas swore softly. Finn leaned forward. Why would he destroy maintenance records? To hide something, Adelaide said. She felt the pieces clicking together. He modified the safety system to suppress alarms, probably to avoid the cost of a shutdown and repair. The quarterly KPI looked good. He got his performance bonus. And nobody knew the reactor was operating outside safe margins. Astrid nodded. If the feds found out, it's a criminal violation. Jail time. The company would face massive fines. He had every reason to bury it. And when Henry discovered the bypass last night, Adelaide said slowly, Clinton must have realized his exposure. Where is Mr. Ward now? Finn asked. He's been attending board meetings remotely, Adelaide said. But I can't touch him. He has friends on the board. If I accuse him without ironclad evidence, I'm the one who'll get removed. Astrid pulled up another file. I might have something. The module that was installed during that modification, the one that bypassed the low-flow alarm, has a serial number. I traced the purchase order. It was approved by Clinton Ward using an emergency procurement authorization. No competitive bidding. Single supplier. The invoice is for $12,000. $12,000 for a relay module? Silas whistled. That's 4 times the normal cost. The supplier is a shell company registered in Delaware, Astrid continued. I can't prove it yet. But the pattern suggests kickbacks. He authorized an unnecessary modification, paid inflated prices, and pocketed the difference. Adelaide stood. Gather everything. Every document, every timestamp, every signature. We're going to need it. She paused. And find Henry Cole. Tell him I want to talk. But Henry was harder to find than expected. He wasn't in the maintenance office. He wasn't in the break room. Finally, Finn tracked him down in the equipment yard behind the facility, where he was fixing an old bicycle. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, watched him work, her legs swinging from a wooden crate. Mr. Cole? Finn approached carefully. The CEO wants to see you. Henry tightened a bolt, without looking up. Tell her I'm busy. It's important. It's about... I know what it's about. Henry set down his wrench. It's about the fact that I touched a reactor control system without authorization. It's about liability. It's about her needing to cover herself in case the feds ask questions. No, Finn said. It's not like that. It's always like that. Henry's voice was tired. He glanced at the little girl. Larissa. Honey. Go inside and get some water. Okay? The girl nodded and scampered off. Henry watched her go. Then turned to Finn. You seem like a good kid, so let me give you advice. Don't be a hero. Heroes get blamed when things go wrong. Keep your head down. Follow procedures. And go home to your family. That's how you survive. Is that why you're a janitor? Finn asked quietly. Survival? Henry smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. A mop bucket can't be forced to sign false reports. A janitor can't be blamed for executive decisions. I chose this job because nobody expects anything from me. And that, son, is freedom. Finn shook his head. The CEO knows who you are. She found your old personnel file. She knows you built this reactor. Then she knows why I left. She wants to make it right. Henry laughed, sharp and bitter. Make it right? 10 years ago, they took my career, my reputation, and my patents. They made me sign papers that said if I ever spoke about what happened, they'd sue me into the ground. They gave me a check and told me to disappear. And I did. I took that money. I raised my brother's kid after he died, and I survived. I don't want it made right. I want to be left alone. Finn stood there, uncertain. For what it's worth. What you did last night saved lives. I know. Henry picked up his wrench again. I also know it won't matter. By tomorrow, someone will have rewritten the incident report to make it sound like the engineering team figured it out. My name won't appear. And that's fine. I don't need credit. I just need that reactor to not kill people. Finn walked back to the facility. He didn't report the conversation to Adelaide directly. Instead, he told Silas, and Silas, who'd been running reactors for 20 years and recognized the weight of hard-earned cynicism, told Adelaide himself. He's not coming, Silas said, and I don't think we can make him. Adelaide stood at her office window, looking out at the reactor containment dome. She thought about Henry Cole, who'd built something beautiful and been destroyed for it. She thought about Clinton Ward, who'd carved safety margins for profit. She thought about herself, signing forms at 26 because her boss told her to, never asking what those forms meant. That evening, she walked to the equipment yard. Henry was still there, adjusting the bike's training wheels while Larissa clapped her hands. Adelaide waited until the girl ran off again, then approached. Mr. Cole. He didn't stand. Come to fire me for unauthorized access? No. Adelaide sat on the crate Larissa had vacated. She was still in her work clothes, the red dress traded for slacks and a blazer, but she didn't care about the dust. I came to apologize. That got his attention. He looked at her. 10 years ago, Adelaide continued, I was a financial analyst. Junior level. I signed off on contract terminations because my supervisor told me to. I didn't ask questions. I didn't look at names. I just processed paperwork. She met his eyes. It's possible I signed yours. I don't know. But if I did, I'm sorry. I was complicit in a system that chewed people up, and I'm still part of that system. But I'm trying to do better. Henry studied her. Why are you telling me this? Because someone sabotaged your reactor. The bypass you found wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. And I think the person who did it is the same person who got you fired 10 years ago. Henry went very still. Clinton Ward. You know, I always knew. I just couldn't prove it. Henry set down his wrench. The test that went wrong? Clinton pushed it. He needed data for an investor presentation, and he didn't want to wait for the proper safety review. I refused. He went over my head, and when the test failed, he made sure all the documentation pointed to me. I'm building a case against him, Adelaide said. I have evidence of the bypass. I have the falsified maintenance records. I have the fraud. But I need someone who understands the technical details to explain it. Someone credible. That's not me. Not anymore. My credibility died 10 years ago. Then let me give it back. Adelaide pulled an access badge from her pocket. This is an admin-level credential. Full plant access. Engineering privileges. It's yours. Tomorrow, I'm convening a board review of safety protocols. I want you there, not as a janitor. As the lead architect of this facility, Henry looked at the badge like it might burn him. Why? Because you're the only person I trust. Adelaide stood. I'm not asking you to be a hero. I'm not asking you to save anyone. I'm asking you to tell the truth about what happened, and I'll stand with you when you do. Henry took the badge. He turned it over in his scarred hands. If I do this, Clinton will fight back. He has resources. He has allies. So do I. Adelaide's voice was steel. And one of them is you. The next morning, the alarms went off again. This time, it wasn't the reactor core. It was a leak alarm in the dry well, the containment structure that surrounded the reactor vessel. Radiation monitors spiked. Emergency protocols kicked in automatically. The facility went into lockdown. Adelaide was in her office when it happened. She ran to the control room. Report, leak detection in Sector 3B, Silas called out. Trace radiation in the containment atmosphere. We're executing emergency ventilation. Adelaide's blood went cold. A radiation leak was catastrophic. It meant immediate shutdown, federal investigation, and media feeding frenzy. How bad? Reading is low, barely above background. But protocol requires, I know the protocol. Adelaide scanned the screens. Something was wrong. The leak alarm had triggered, but the source radiation monitors weren't showing the corresponding spike. It was as if the leak alarm itself was false. Finn, check the alarm calibration. Finn pulled up the diagnostic logs. Alarm was manually tested 40 minutes ago. Passed all checks. Then, suddenly, he stopped. Wait. The test signature. It's Clinton Ward's authorization code. Adelaide's hands clenched. He triggered this deliberately. Why would he? Silas started, then understood. To shut us down. To create chaos before the board review. The facility PA crackled. Federal inspectors would be notified automatically. The media would already be gathering at the gates. The board would be in emergency session within the hour. And somewhere, Clinton Ward would be spinning the narrative. Unstable operations, unsafe leadership, a CEO in over her head who'd let a janitor tamper with critical systems. Security arrived at Adelaide's office 30 minutes later. Ma'am, there's been a development. We found evidence in the maintenance log that suggests unauthorized access to containment yesterday. Tools with fingerprints. The prints match an employee named Henry Cole. Adelaide's stomach dropped. That's not possible. The prints are clear. And Mr. Cole's access logs show he entered Sector 3B during an off-shift period. He was set up. Adelaide's voice shook with anger. Clinton Ward planted evidence. Ma'am, the board has requested your presence immediately. They're considering emergency suspension of your authority pending investigation. Adelaide walked into the boardroom like a prisoner to execution. 12 faces around a mahogany table. William Pierce, the board chairman, sat at the head. Clinton Ward sat to his right, expression carefully neutral. Adelaide, Pierce said, we have a serious situation. I'm aware. The federal regulators are on site. The media is demanding answers. And we have evidence that you allowed unauthorized personnel to access critical systems, resulting in a containment breach. There was no breach, Adelaide said. The alarm was falsified. And the evidence against Henry Cole was planted. Clinton leaned forward. With all respect, that's a serious accusation. Do you have proof? Adelaide met his eyes. I have proof that you modified reactor safety systems 6 months ago without proper authorization. I have proof that you destroyed maintenance records to hide it. I have proof that you used emergency procurement to funnel money to a shell company. And I have proof that you falsified the leak alarm to create a crisis and discredit my leadership. The room went silent. Those are criminal accusations, Pierce said slowly. You're prepared to substantiate them, Astrid? Adelaide nodded to the company counsel. Astrid stood, connected her laptop to the conference room projector, and began presenting. Security footage of Clinton removing logs, purchase orders with inflated costs, the serial number trail, the timestamp analysis showing Clinton had accessed Sector 3B the previous night, not Henry. And then, the final piece. We recovered a partial video frame from the security backup system, Astrid said. The primary camera in Sector 3B reported a recording error. But the motion sensor logged the timestamp. By cross-referencing entry logs with thermal signatures in adjacent sectors, we can prove Clinton Ward was in containment during the time the alarm test was conducted. Clinton's face went pale. This is absurd. You're concocting evidence to protect yourself. No, said a voice from the doorway. Henry Cole stepped into the boardroom, wearing not a janitor's uniform but clean slacks and a button-down shirt. He carried a folder thick with documents. She's telling the truth, and I can prove it. Pierce looked confused. Who are you? I'm the lead engineer who designed this reactor. My name is Henry Cole. Some of you may remember me. 10 years ago, Mr. Ward had me terminated and erased from company records after I refused to falsify a safety report. He took my patents. He took my career. And yesterday, he tried to frame me for sabotage to cover up the fact that he's been compromising reactor safety for profit. Henry walked to the table and opened the folder. These are the original design specifications for Loop 7G. You'll note that the low-flow alarm is a critical safety feature, non-bypassable by design. This document shows the modification Clinton authorized 6 months ago, explicitly bypassing that alarm. This invoice shows he paid a markup to a company he controls. And this maintenance log, which he tried to destroy, shows that he directed technicians to adjust sensor calibration to hide evidence of reduced safety margins. He laid out the documents like cards in a winning hand. You hired Adelaide Monroe to stabilize this company. She's doing that. But Clinton Ward is trying to destroy her because she discovered his fraud. He triggered a false alarm to create panic. He planted evidence to frame me. And he's betting that you'll protect him because he's been here longer and knows where the bodies are buried. Pierce looked at the documents. Looked at Clinton. Is this true? Clinton's composure cracked. The modifications were approved operational adjustments. Henry Cole is a disgruntled former employee with an axe to grind. You can't trust. I have the checksums. Finn's voice came from a laptop at the back of the room. The alarm module Clinton installed has embedded logging. It records every activation command. The false alarm yesterday was triggered by his personal access code at 0400 hours. The same code he used to access containment and plant the tools with Henry's fingerprints. Clinton stood abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. Melavier, your lawyer will meet you at the federal building, Pierce said coldly. Gentlemen, call security. Mr. Ward is hereby terminated and will be escorted from the premises. Miss Hale, please contact the federal prosecutors. We'll be cooperating fully with any investigation. Clinton Ward was led from the room in silence. Adelaide felt her hands shaking. 10 years of injustice, unraveling in 10 minutes. She looked at Henry. He looked exhausted. Pierce cleared his throat. Mr. Cole, on behalf of this board, I apologize for the injustice you suffered. We would like to discuss your reinstatement. Reinstatement, Henry repeated. The word tasted strange. As what? Chief Engineer. Full restoration of your personnel record, patents, and reputation. Retroactive compensation for lost wages. And a seat on our technical advisory board. Henry looked at Adelaide. She nodded slightly. I'll accept, Henry said, on 3 conditions. 1. All safety system modifications require dual engineering review with public documentation. 2. KPI metrics will never override safety margins. 3. We establish an anonymous reporting system so employees can raise concerns without fear of retaliation. Done, Pierce said. Miss Monroe, please work with Mr. Cole to implement these changes. Adelaide stepped forward. I'd like to propose something more. An engineering charter that we publish publicly. A commitment that safety comes first, transparency is mandatory, and technical integrity is non-negotiable. If we want the public's trust, we need to earn it. Agreed. Pierce stood. This board is adjourned. The room emptied slowly. Adelaide and Henry were the last to leave. In the hallway, she turned to him. I didn't know if you'd come. I almost didn't. Henry smiled slightly. But Larissa asked me what I used to do for work, and I realized I didn't want her to grow up, thinking her uncle was too scared to tell the truth. Thank you. Adelaide's voice was soft. For saving the reactor. For trusting me. For all of it. You stood up when it counted. Henry held her gaze. That's rare. She touched his hand briefly. We have a lot of work to do. The reactor needs a full audit. The safety systems need to be rebuilt to the original spec. And we need to train a generation of engineers who understand what this plant is really supposed to be. I know. Henry looked toward the reactor dome through the glass wall. It'll take years. Good thing we have time. 6 months passed. The AstraCore facility underwent the most comprehensive safety review in its history. Every system was inspected, documented, and certified. The engineering charter became a model for the industry. Federal regulators held it up as an example of transparent corporate governance. Adelaide Monroe's photo appeared in trade journals, interviews, and conferences. But always, in those photos, Henry Cole stood beside her. The facility's main entrance now displayed a bronze plaque. Henry Cole, lead architect, original design engineer. The letters gleamed in the morning Sunday. Inside, the control room hummed with quiet efficiency. Silas ran his shift with confidence, born of properly maintained systems. Finn led a training program that taught new engineers not just procedures, but the principles behind them. Astrid had built the anonymous reporting system into a department that investigated concerns without fear or favor. And in the corner office overlooking the reactor, Adelaide stood beside Henry, reviewing plans for the next generation of reactor design. AstraCore Mark II. Cleaner, safer, built on everything they'd learned. "You know," Adelaide said, "when I first saw you, I thought you were just a janitor." "I was a janitor," Henry replied. "Still am. Technically. I just clean bigger messes now." She laughed. It was a sound she made more often these days. "We make a good team." Henry looked at her, really looked at her. The CEO who'd had every reason to protect the status quo but chose truth instead. The woman who'd risked her career to stand beside him when it counted. "Yeah," he said quietly, "we do." She placed her hand over his on the blueprint. Neither of them moved it. In the atrium below, visitors streamed through on a community open house. Children pressed their faces to the glass, watching the reactor's gentle pulse displayed on the monitors. Safe, stable, honest, Larissa was among them, holding the calibration wrench Henry had given her. "That's my uncle," she told the other kids proudly. "He built this, and he kept it safe when nobody else could." Henry heard her voice echo up through the atrium. He looked at Adelaide. "She's not wrong." "Neither was I," Adelaide said. "When I said you couldn't fix the reactor, you didn't fix it. You reminded it what it was supposed to be." She smiled. "And maybe reminded all of us too." Outside, the city lights began to glow as evening fell. Every bulb, every screen, every warm home, powered by the reactor below. By the systems Henry had designed with honest hands. By the truth that Adelaide had chosen to defend. By the promise that safety would always matter more than profit. On the observation deck, Adelaide and Henry stood side by side, watching the city light up like constellations. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Some truths were too large for words. The reactor's heartbeat pulsed steady and strong. The screens glowed green. And somewhere in the depth of all that steel and concrete and carefully calibrated machinery, the systems remembered the hands that built them and the courage it took to make them right again. A plant is built with metal and wire. But a future is built with integrity. And in the space between those two truths, Henry Cole and Adelaide Monroe had found something worth protecting. Not just a reactor, but the promise that honest work still matters. That technical skill paired with moral courage can change everything. That the person others overlook might be exactly the one everyone needs. The janitor who remembered every wire, the CEO who learned to see, and the reactor that, in the end, saved them both.